In this video, I'm going to continue modeling the Samaritan pistol here, switch up gears, change techniques to a smooth mesh preview technique to do the handle. And this technique is sometimes called proxy modeling, sometimes called box modeling, because typically folks start with cubes. But it really can start with anything you want. And the underlying idea is you use a low poly cage to drive a higher poly mesh. So I'm going to go and show you how this works just as a basic example. I'll just add a cube, and this is just something to think about when you're doing a low res model where you do have to be concerned with how many polys your object has. So right now you can see this has 6 faces. I'm going to press 3 to turn on Smooth Mesh Preview and it turns to 96, which is hard to understand at first. But if you use the page up and page down keys, you can sort of go through different levels. So here it is at level 0, which is the cage. Level 1, it's 24. So basically what it's doing is it's taking every single face and it's cutting it vertically and horizontally. So 6 faces become 24 faces. And then those 24 faces get cut horizontally and vertically as well, so that quadruples to 96. And then the next step up, 384. So you can see you add polys really quickly when you use this method. So it's something to be aware of with Smooth Mesh Preview. So the reason I say that right now is we want to go ahead and figure out what we're going to use to start this. So if I used a box, for example, it would give me front and back edge loops that I could use to control the form, but I need something in the middle, as you can see here. And the bottom of this handle is perfectly round. So I want something that approximates a round shape really well. And a box does sort of turn into a round shape, but if I had to add resolution here so I could add this curve through the middle, see this angle like this, then it's going to end up getting sort of a flat side and a rounder side. So what makes more sense here is just start with a cylinder. So figuring out what resolution cylinder is the important part here. And to do that, you need to think about how it's going to be multiplied as it goes up. So if I use a 6-sided cylinder, then I did 2 levels of smoothing on top of that. That's going to give me 24 polys around here. And 24 is probably more than I actually need to make this look really good. Plus 2 levels of subdivision is going to end up subdividing this thing probably more than I need it to be subdivided in this direction. So another way to do this would be go a little bit higher with our source and go up to, let's say, an 8-sided cylinder, and then just do 1 level of subdivision. So that gives us probably the right number vertically, and we'll have still 16 polys around, which will look really good from the back. And we'll probably never ever see this thing from the bottom, which is really the only place where you have to worry about how many polys do you have available there. 16 is probably not enough if we would see it dominantly from that direction, but we won't, so it doesn't really matter. So I'll go ahead and do this. Create a cylinder here. And like I said, we'll go with 8 divisions and then just try to start with some value that makes sense and up Y. Okay, so get this thing roughly positioned and scale this guy up. I'm a huge klutz. I got a new mouse and I can't use it worth a crap yet, so I apologize for all the goof ups that are bound to happen in this video. So I'm going to control click on the Y manipulator so that I expand Z and X at the same time. It's important to be aware of the X axis, even though you can't see it in this particular view. You want the X axis to scale up the same time as the Z because, again, this is supposed to be a perfect circle on the bottom here. So now you need to go ahead and add some divisions vertically, and since I have this as just a primitive, I'm going to go ahead and do that in subdivisions height. So probably something like that is going to be fine for now. The bottom is basically lined up. Go ahead and get moving on the top here. And I'm going to do this as a whole span. So I'm going to basically try to get the span lined up, and then I'm going to come back and I'll tweak things around by hand to sort of match up. So that looks pretty good in terms of size, and the angle is probably pretty close as a starting point. Do the same thing on this guy. Get this a pretty strong angle here. And scale that down. Again, it is important that you use the some sort of scale method that maintains proportions between X and Z. In this case, Y doesn't really make any difference. So something like that looks fine. I'm just going to angle this one, even though this doesn't really need to be angled. I'm just going to sort of feather that in so the topology looks a little nicer, has a little better edge loop flow. Okay, so something like that's probably pretty close. And then this guy's pretty close too. And we'll go ahead and just tweak this just a hair. Keep that moving down, that angle change. So something like that looks pretty good. So these corners are going to round out a bit. This guy's a little bit extreme in terms of angle. See how much gap there is here and how little there is here. So I'd probably want to reposition that. Although maybe before I do that, I can see that I actually need another span right here in order to hold that edge. So I'm going to go ahead and shift right click, insert edge loop, and then pull this guy out here. And maybe even before I add that edge loop, it might make sense to go ahead and reposition some of these verts, because I'm going to need to do that, and I might as well just do it on one instead of two. So go ahead and move that up into position. Again, you always want to use your marquee select, otherwise you're going to end up just selecting one side like I just did there, since I can't control this mouse worth of crap. So something like that. That gives me the proper flow. Here now will be really easy to go ahead and add an edge loop. So that should more or less follow the form. And then I'll need to go ahead and scale that up because it looks like it's actually angled out a little bit. And as that scales, in this case it moves up. So I'm going to go ahead and slide that back down in position. Something like that's looking pretty good. This guy doesn't look all that bad now, so I'm going to go ahead and leave that. This one's been scaled way up too high on the front side, so go ahead and bring that back into some reasonable position. And I'm going to just sort of try to follow this angle here, just sort of taper it off into the edge. And one thing I know is I'm going to need to match up a span of geometry to this thing here so I can really make those things match. But I'm going to go ahead and take a look at what this looks like as a smooth mesh preview object. So this is what the cage looks like, and typically when you're doing proxy modeling like this, your low poly object should roughly approximate what you are looking for out of your high res. Oftentimes I see people modeling with this method and they just have verts pulled forever away from their object, or a lot of like interpenetrations happening in their mesh. Typically you don't want to see that. A little bit of that's okay, but if you're having to move verts a long ways away from what you're modeling, you probably don't have enough resolution. So just add a span of geometry and then you'll be able to control that a little bit finer instead of having to pull it all the way across the scene. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just press 3. That gives me my smooth mesh preview, and again I'm going to press down, so that's my cage version, so up 1, this is what my final resolution is going to look like. So something like that. And right now the handle's not quite right, it's definitely not following the form properly, so I need to go ahead and make some changes here. As you can see from the side image here, we're sort of falling away from the image, the reference image in many places. So I'll go ahead and make the first change is going to be down here, and I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that vertex, grab the face, control F10 to convert to edges there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Smooth Mesh Preview and show you the Crease Tool. So the Crease Tool is a good way to control this. I could add another edge loop and that would hold this edge too, but ultimately I'm trying to control the number of polys in this model, so a crease is just a little bit more efficient way to do that. So go to Edit Mesh, Crease, and middle mouse click and drag, and now you can see it's not smoothing across that edge anymore. So basically I'm just limiting how much it smooths. You can see the geometry looks like crud under here, but we'll fix that up in a little bit. It's not a big deal at all. Up top, we're looking pretty good. We're just not matching the overall image now. So I'm going to go ahead and start grabbing these rows and expanding them out. That looks pretty good. Probably could do a little bit of smooth mesh or soft selection through here to make that work a little better, but it shouldn't take too long. Again, that is the point of this method of modeling, is you don't have to use that many spans to create the shape. So you can create a nice smooth shape without having to go in and find 50 different points that are laying on a curve. So this ended up looking pretty good up here. Everything's looking pretty tight, back here we're falling off a little bit, and actually I can tell that I'm going to want to crease these, so I'm going to go ahead and check the effect of that before I start moving all of my verts all over the place. So first I'll just start with that one there, and I'll just shift right click to grab that out of a marking menu, and then mess up the selection because I can't use this mouse, and then middle click and drag to sort of stiffen that guy up. And let me just make sure what that's doing in the okay, so it's definitely having the right effect. That's what I want this thing to do. And I'll probably have the same problem up here than I had on the bottom. So let me go ahead and get rid of that middle vert. And in this case, I probably do want a division across here. I probably do want this thing to hold that division. So I could either delete the vert or just delete all of these edges that are tying it in. So again, just wireframe to get this guy, and then shift right click to get that delete menu. So let me just see what that does now. Okay, I could tie this one in over here, but I really don't think I'll need to. So I'm going to just leave it like that with an end gun on top. Basically looking fine. And I'm just going to grab these edges on the outside, doing the same thing, Control F10, and then go ahead and switch over to edge mode and get rid of that guy. And now I'm going to use those guys in a crease set. So again, shift right click and grab the crease tool, middle click and drag, and you see the effect that has at making that a crease. So that's definitely the right direction. That's what I'm looking for out of this. You see that it looks much more hard edged here. So that's looking pretty good. Now I need to just move those guys to actually fit the reference image a little bit better. Not too bad though. Okay, now there are some considerations up here. Like I said, I'm definitely going to need to have some of the spans of the handle coincide with the spans here. So I want this edge loop to come through right around here. So right now it's not coming in quite high enough. So I'm going to go ahead and tweak that a little bit. I'll go ahead and fix this back area here. Grab these guys and just sort of pull them in just a little bit to see if I can make that form match a little bit closer. That looks like that did it. And then up here, I'll probably just grab those edges, and I did grab 2 edges there, even though I can't see it. There it is. For some reason, in Smooth Mesh Preview, you can't actually see what you have selected, which is weird. But I'll go ahead and move those guys up, and again, I'll just use the slide edge tool and just slide that up to basically match. And the reason I'm doing this again is I need some topology that I'm going to snap the verts of this thing to the verts of this thing so that I can really make that a nice smooth transition. And then in this case, I'm going to go ahead and just move these up, and I think it's going to work out fine. So something like that's looking pretty good. And I'll look at this thing from the front as well to make sure that what I've just done is working. We're still way too wide through here. So I'm going to just grab this whole span right here and pull it in. And the reason is, again, I really need this to work with this piece. So now you can see that it's just starting to poke through. That's about right where I want it to be. So that's about as close as I'm going to be able to get that. I'll just have to tweak out a couple polys or a couple verts in the end to make that really work. Okay, so that's looking pretty good as my rough shape. I think it looks like this junk up here might be excessively wide because I did the crease on it. So I'm going to go ahead and just bring that in. I'll just grab this edge loop and then press the up arrow to grab the edge ring, and I'll just pull all those guys in. So something like that's probably a little bit more the way this thing should look. It shouldn't be quite so wide. And as I do this, notice that this is Smooth Mesh previewed, so I'm going to need to come back in here and tweak this guy just one more time. Okay, I think that's probably pretty dang close. And then I want to pay attention to the rest of how this thing is coming together. Like this edge, that's looking pretty good, basically stopping in the right place. I think this is looking like a pretty good shape. Now this guy down here, um, we sort of have the option of, this is more or less in the right place. I was going to say we could end it here and then do some extrusions to bring out this bottom cap piece, but I think this is going to work fine. I'll just cut it after the fact and add that in. So I think that's going to work pretty well. So at this point we are ready to convert this thing to polys, because like I say, being low poly going into a game engine, we actually have quite a lot of cleanup we need to do from this point. So I'm going to go ahead and select the handle and then modify, convert, and then smooth mesh preview to polygons. And what that does is that just uses the settings, whatever you have going on with smooth mesh preview, and gives you exactly that same thing in polys. So that's what I was looking for. Everything's looking just like it was, and now I'll just set to starting to fix this stuff. So select that vert, delete the vertex, grab that face, Control F10 to select edges, and then shift right click and just harden those. And that'll fix that rendering issue where you see the shading coming up and around and looking really junky. And well, let's go ahead and finish this bottom part of the handle here. So you can see that this thing has a bevel in like this. So we'll go ahead and do that, and it looks like I should probably pull this down just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add one edge loop here, just so nothing changes, and that'll be the place where this pulls in. And I could go ahead and just add a couple more spans. This could be done as a texture, by the way, but if you want to add it in as geometry, this is how you would do it. So I'll just add a couple spans, something like that. And I'm going to grab this bottom span. And again, the problem with selecting this is it's an n-gon, so I can't grab the edge loop. So the easier way is just to grab the face. So I'll just grab the face, and I'm just going to move that down to its final position, which looks like it's around there. And then I'll just grab Control F10 again, switch that to edges, and then in here I'm going to go ahead and choose to bevel this. Okay, and that looks like a little steep offset, so I'm going to go ahead and Control, right click and drag, and let me just make sure what that looks like. That's looking pretty close. So now I have a beveled edge there, and then I could just grab this edge loop here and just scale it in. And then the last thing I'm going to want to do is see how that gets darker and darker. And I probably want the gap between those two to be just slightly less than that. Is I'll select those three edge loops like that and then just harden them. So that way we don't have to shade across that and everything should look nice. So there you have that little crack. We're looking pretty good. We're at almost 500 triangles for this handle, which isn't too bad, but if you see some areas that look like they are potentially not adding too much to the shape, now would be the time to try to remove those. This guy here might be a candidate for that. Like this is holding a hip, and this is more or less a straight line, same here. So I could just try to delete that. Very, very little change to the form, and what there is I could definitely live with. So I'll go ahead and grab this edge loop. I'm going to choose to do a slide edge now. Just sort of push that guy up, and then I'll do the same thing here. All I'm trying to do is redistribute this just to give a little bit more even spacing across here. That's okay. This is more or less straight, so it's okay that that's open. That looks pretty good. Now this edge here, probably not necessary. I'm going to go ahead and just get rid of that guy right now. I really don't think that was contributing anything to our form. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. Depending on what we're looking for out of this this edge here, we could either straight harden this, which is going to be probably too strong an angle. So now you see it feels like a completely separate piece. That might be good enough, or you might just add another edge loop through there, and that would give you the basic sense that it was a hard edge like that, but not quite so severe. For me, this is like, that might just be a little much. So I'm just going to back that one off, and I'm going to go ahead and add an edge loop in here. So I'll just do insert edge loop here, and I'm just going to put this guy really close, something like that, and then I'll just move that basically straight down to have a little bit of a buffer area that goes across. So now you can see, like, you get that the idea of that's a hard edge, but you don't have the severity of the cutoff of lighting. So now it's continuous lighting across that. It's just you really can see the hip there. So that's looking pretty good. So now we're going to take on the front of this thing. Okay, so let's take a look at this thing from the side here. Make sure everything's lining up, and you can see there's some perspective stuff that I'm just sort of trying to forget about as I look at this. I think more or less this is all lined up the way it should. The top is looking really nice. I'm going to have to do a little bit of snapping through here, so let's go ahead and get to that. And basically what we're doing here is we're going to try to make the handle and this piece fit together really organically. And what it looks like to me is, and this is just a guess, the handle stops here. We can plainly see that in the image here, that the handle stops here and then it has a cutout. So the metal is the piece that is sort of cut out and then attaches through that screw probably right there. But probably what's different about what I've got going on here model wise and what the real thing is this piece here is probably rounded through this area and then it flattens out somewhere up here. So I'm going to go ahead and make that happen. I'm going to use this as a guide. As I add new geometry here, I'm going to snap it to these verts through here, and then I'll delete this underlying geometry here. So we'll go ahead and start by moving some verts into place. I'll make sure reflection is turned on, Control Shift right click there, and then V, and just snap that into place. So again, it should only have to move just a small amount, that way I don't have to worry about going back and fixing issues. So that's why I line those up ahead of time. So now they should both be snapped. That guy is not snapped, and that means that our symmetry is off. This just moved in symmetry, and this handle is symmetrical. We just built it. It was made out of a cylinder. It was exactly symmetrical. So that means this is not symmetrical. Turn off reflection. So probably what happened was when I made this thing, I just didn't recenter it properly. I don't even remember what happened on this. So I'm just going to select all the faces that are exactly on X. So all those should line up together. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm just going to snap that out to meet that vert there. So just V, snap. It didn't have to move very much, but now it's more symmetrical. Now I'll just really quickly fix the issues that just created, like this thing here now doesn't actually align. So I'll get this face and snap that out, and then back here there should be a little bit of a problem through the curve, but it's so minor I can't even see it actually. This curve here, like this piece is moved but this one hasn't. I can't even tell. I'm just going to leave it alone like that. That should be fine. Okay, so now those should be exactly the same from left to right, which it looks like they are. So now I need to start adding resolution to this piece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and remove a poly here and then bring some spans down like this. So I can see how many spans I need. 1, 2, 3 spans. That's pretty much all I need to match this resolution around here. I've already got the first point snap there, so I just need to add a center one and then 2 on the outside like this. So again, I'll go ahead and do that with the interactive split tool, and I can be really sloppy about this thing. It really doesn't matter where they end up right now because I'm just going to snap them into a line in just a minute. So like that. And then just to be super nasty fast, I can just pull it straight down here. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is just double click that edge loop and probably just snap it where it meets at that edge right there. So just V and then hit that guy, V and then hit that guy. So see that just straightens out those loops just fine. So grab the face, remove that face. So that gives us what we're looking for there. And now I just need to add one more division across here. So I'll just do that with the insert edge loop tool. And this time I'm going to go switch this thing to multiple edge loops. just set it to 1, and that way I'm sure that it snaps exactly in the middle. So now this is perfectly down the middle of this thing. Okay, and just turn off those guys there. Okay, so now it's just snapping. So let me go ahead and grab this guy and start snapping these into place. And I'll just go ahead and turn on symmetry so I don't have to do this on one side. Whoops. I am such a klutz with this mouse so far. Okay. Now this guy here, I don't really trust. I think that guy, this guy's poked out a little further than where I think it should be. So let's take a look in here, have a better reference. So actually now at this point, probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab this center one here, and I'm just going to pull those out to something that looks about right to me. So something like that's about right, and then I'll just accommodate in here as well. And I'll pull out this middle one just so it spreads out just a bit. Okay, so now that should be roughly a nice smooth arc. And I forgot I have the center one to pull out, so I want to go ahead and make this a little less extreme through here, something like that. And then I'll go back and just grab those middles and pull those out. Okay, so again, just trying to make a nice smooth transition, and it's just a guess anyways. I don't even know if this is actually how this thing is laid out. Okay, those things spreading out is sort of not really necessary, and it just looks bad. So I'm going to go ahead and snap those in there. So the line should be basically the same. Probably move those guys down a little bit just to make that curve feel a little better. Something like that looks better topology wise. So the bottom ones are all completely snapped to these verts, which is great. And hey buddy, and these guys here, the underlying polys can now basically just be deleted. So I'm going to switch to faces here and start deleting these polys out. And through here, I'm going to have a little bit of an issue. I'm going to need to add back part of this, or I could potentially just not delete these, and that one actually is going to be fine. I'll just add that back in. Could 6 on one, half a dozen on the other, really. Okay, so I'm going to keep grabbing these guys to go. Anything that's basically completely covered is fine to go, which you can see there actually more here, at least that guy, and then the rest of those are going to need to stay. So I'll go ahead and press delete, and then when we go back to shaded mode, we shouldn't really see much. So these guys are sticking through, which is fine. It's not really a big deal. I just need to do a slight accommodation. In fact, these edges here probably could use a little tweaking anyway. So let me go back to the side, and I'm going to try to make that line up well with this. So as you can see, it looks like these actually should be a little bit higher. And I am a huge klutz with this thing. A little bit higher, something like that. That looks pretty good. So those are probably now inside, which they are. Looks pretty good. And it also looks like those should probably come down a little bit. So let me take a look at what this looks like in the perspective view, and we'll just make our final adjustments there. I see. So what the issue is, they need to move out, basically. So I'm just going to deselect that one and make sure reflection is turned on, and then move these guys out here. What I'm trying to do is make them come closer to that edge, so it feels like it's more of the finished edge. So that looks pretty good right there. And then I'll move this guy out, and just somewhere where it basically is up and out of the way. Probably more or less keeping line with that. Oh, I see, we're going across an edge there, so need to accommodate, unfortunately. I'm just, that should be, no, we got an extra edge there. Okay, I think this is going to be fine. I'll just try to snap that guy to this edge, completely junking that up. Okay, so that looks fine now. I'll just push this guy up just a little bit so it's inside. Something like that looks pretty good. And then just connect these guys up. I'll just do an append to poly here. And I'll need to add one more span there so I can make those work across that edge there. So I'm basically just going to do a split tool here, and I'll come back and get that edge loop out in 1 second. Okay, back to the side. So now this guy, whoops, I don't want to have them both selected. Make sure symmetry's on, and then snap that guy. They'll both be snapped into place. Everything should look good. Again, this edge loop here can basically go. This is still a nice quad. Whoops. So just press delete and not delete edge. Okay, so that should basically get us lined up there. That thing looks like it's basically ending right. I think if I had left that one span through here, I could make that look just a little nicer so the curve came down. Right now it looks a little quirky. Maybe I can make an adjustment just based on this vert right there. So I'll try, see if I can make that feel a little nicer. That's working just fine. So now I'm going to be able to make that be a smooth transition down like this. And then I would like that to be just a little tighter to this edge. So I'm just going to do some this is all just fine level stuff at this point, just trying to tweak this thing to make it feel right. Whoops, the wrong edge there. Okay, so I'm just barely going to set that in, and this way it'll feel like it's holding tighter to that edge. I think that just looks like it's manufactured properly now. Okay, so I'm going to do just a little tweak here just to accommodate what's happening in my edge loop flow. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And basically just need to soften these guys. So now this piece comes down and meets this piece, and you can see they share all those common points, so it's a guaranteed connection. Looks the way it needs to look. So that's it. The handle's looking good. You can see from the bottom it's a little bit rougher in terms of resolution than some of the other parts of this mesh, but again, we're going to see it like this, and from this angle it actually looks really good. So alright, that's it for the handle.